when everyone stops communicating and starts calling each other names, you end up with a scenario where somebody tries to use force, tries to force the hand.
Right.
And if they're politically savvy and they have economic weight behind them, it can really raise hell.
This is
and
like
I think that's coming.
Matt Hill, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to have you on the pod. We've been like semi-talking about doing this episode for several months now. I think in Vegas in May, like we were kind of chit-chatting about this and I got the idea to have you on. So I'm excited that you're here.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
It's timely. It's a good idea to do.
It is timely. We're going to be talking about the arbitrary data wars a little bit as kind of the term that I've adopted. You're sort of kind of planted in the middle of that. I don't know if by accident or if intentional. We'll kind of get into that. But yeah, you have a pretty unique kind of front row and center view into what's happening. So I'm excited to chat about that. But before we kind of get into the details, I want to sort of position you in the space for folks who maybe don't know you or your company. I mean, your company in and of itself, separately from politics, is also fascinating in its own right. So yeah, maybe you'd start by introducing yourself and Start9.
Sure. Well, the first thing I'll say, first of all, I'm Matt Hill, co-founder and CEO of Start9. And, the first thing I'll respond to is what you just said, is that sort of separate from politics. And we knew from the get-go, me and my co-founder, that it would be unavoidable. It would be impossible to tease apart what we do and politics. Right? We are inherently a political organization. I would go further and say that we are inherently a mega-political organization. For anyone familiar with the term coined in the sovereign individual, megapolitics are the forces that actually influence and inform political structures.
Meaning like systemic, like infrastructural players
namely
in a
technology.
Political system.
Namely technology.
Oh, mega
right?
players specifically refers to technology.
It's like metapolitics, right? It could be another way to think about it, but megapolitics is the word that they used, which is, you have at any given moment in any given society, you have political systems, and acting within those political systems is called being political. That is politics. But what determined the political system in the first place, right, is actually the technology available, the time in history, could even be things like the climate of a given region can have influences on the political structures that emerge. So Start9 is less political and more mega-political in that we are trying to bring about the emergence of a new computing paradigm that will invariably influence the political structures that result in society. And this is very much in line with the cypherpunk philosophy and movement of, don't vote your way into a better world, build technology that enforces the world you want and bring the politicians around to you, make them come to the table and play ball, make them, not just them, but, it's trying to orient the course of the river rather than figuring out which boat to ride.
Well, and this was something that I was like, my mind was blown when I was introduced to your company, which, by the way, was at TabConf maybe 3 or 4 years ago. This was like pre-ordinals, pre any arbitrary data, anything. I remember meeting you guys and you were sort of saying, all of your data basically that you touch on your computer is all stored on these centralized servers, which, are infringing upon your privacy and creating all of these other problems. There's a whole variety of risks associated with that you take on as a consumer and as an internet user. And we provide basically an alternative that protects you against those risks. Maybe can you share a little bit about, specifically how Start9 is solving?
From a high level, you can think about the way humans use computers in various paradigms. Okay, you have the original personal computers from like the 70s, early 80s, when personal computers really rose to prominence. And those were isolated systems. They were truly personal, right? They weren't networked together. Your computer was a glorified calculator, right, that you could use locally. And then we moved gradually into the age of the internet, and what the dominant computing paradigm that emerged out of that is the one that exists today, which is cloud computing. And effectively what this means is that you, me, and everyone else is running around with remote controls. So cell phones, tablets, laptops, desktops, even IoT devices. These are remote controls that are remotely controlling servers that are owned and operated by an increasingly small number of entities.
Namely who? Google,
Microsoft,
Amazon.
Apple, Google, Amazon, Oracle, who themselves are beholden to, governments in whatever jurisdiction they're incorporated and beyond, right? Like those jurisdictional lines are a bit blurry these days. And so what you have is everyone is using remote controls that are remotely controlling these computers. And this creates a variety of problems that we believe to be unsolvable within the paradigm and that are existential in nature. So you have mass surveillance, right? So just spying in general, whether it's targeted or mass. You have censorship. So when everyone is using these central servers, those central servers decide what gets through and what does not, right? They're the ultimate arbiter of truth.
And that's different than like Twitter censoring your data? Is that like a different level of censorship? Is that
no?
A
It's
separate
exactly
issue?
what I'm talking about.
Oh, it is. Okay,
is that when we are all using a Twitter server to spread information, that Twitter server gets to decide what's true and what's not true. Less common through overt deplatforming, which is what most people think of as censorship.
Because they're trying to be stealth
about it. And through much more subtle algorithmic amplification and suppression of certain messages. So, chances are infinite monkey theorem that everything is going to be said, from crazy to totally accurate, positive, negative, etc. And if you control the dials, you just decide which ones get through and are heard the most. So you can amplify the messages you want, de-amplify the messages you don't want. And by you, that could be a government, enforcing you to amplify or de-amplify messaging, which is what we saw, right, over the past few years. And so censorship takes on this very insidious, opaque form where it's hard to even spot that it's happening, this like shadow banning type of strategy. And you can just drown out messages that you don't want with very, very loud, persistent messages that you do want. And this is a form of censorship. And it's very effective. The third is just outright cost. So it's economically inefficient to use middlemen for anything. Middlemen are always an added cost to any voluntary exchange. So if we're all using middlemen servers, then they're going to get paid one way or another. And the way that has happened to date is they mine data. So like if you're not paying for the piece of software, you are the product and you're paying with your data. And they can also charge you directly in the form of subscription costs, right? Like monthly SaaS subscriptions.
Do you know how we got to cloud computing? Like, why was cloud computing like chosen, for lack of a better word, as the winning system in this situation? I mean, is it evil? Like, is it like they wanted to do all this stuff? Like, what was the reason?
No, we'll call it a growing pain. And in my mind, it didn't. I don't want to be historically deterministic here. Like, it didn't have to happen, but it made sense to me that it did. It was opportunism, right? So, in the early days of computing, it was very lonely. And people wanted to connect their computers together, but there's a certain degree of technical acumen required to be able to do this stuff, even to this day. And there were a few, right, super geeks that really understood how to do it and just decided that they were going to do it on everyone else's behalf and charge a fee. It's a very reasonable conclusion to come to. And these were the Bill Gates and, Steve Jobs and everybody. And I don't want to pick names because they're varying degrees of incentives and or motivations of why they did the things that they did that I don't want to get into because I'm not them and I don't know exactly what they were thinking. But at the end of the day, there was a huge business opportunity to intermediate and custody what was a rampant and rapidly growing demand for networked computing. And so they did, and they captured it. And they did it in a way where they could put up some walls and hang on to their share of this massive new industry and pie. And so we're all just using their computers.
Do you think they understood the negative externalities that would be that society would accrue as a result of this system? Or
maybe I don't know. I would argue that at least some of the players that I'm aware of are aware of them, and they would not think of them as negative externalities. They would think of them as necessary controls to keep, society
and business opportunities.
Place,
I mean, they make
right?
money off of these situations. The
incumbent powers don't think they're evil, I don't think. I think they think it's paternal.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, we need to shepherd society.
It's condescending.
Yeah, correct. So I don't
we
think
know better.
Yeah, I don't think they think they're the baddies. I think they just think that they're in power because they're elite and better, and that they know better, and they should make decisions on behalf of everyone else. It's authoritarianism, right? It's authority.
Okay, so this is a good opportunity to share. So how does Start9 solve this problem, like practically?
Yeah. Real quick, the fourth reason there's a fourth, which is that it's insecure. So cloud computing is the fourth reason that it needs to die, is because when everyone is using these central servers, the central servers become prime targets.
Central points of failure,
Correct.
Essentially.
Central points of failure for individual, corporate, and even nation-state level attacks. And if and when, right, these servers get breached, you being just one participant on the server, you're just collateral damage. You weren't actually being targeted, right? Nobody was after you. They were after the server. But because you were using the server, you're now negatively impacted. So it's very insecure from a personal cybersecurity standpoint to be putting your data on many different central servers, because they will invariably get hacked and you go down with the ship. So the best way to do it is to just not be on the ship, which is what we can get into now. Right. How do we fix this?
It reminds me of like keeping your Bitcoin on exchanges, right? It's like you're trusting exchanges to hold all your Bitcoin. You're trusting these centralized servers to hold all your data. Yeah.
Whatever they happen to be storing, whether it's private key data or just your photos, they're eventually going to get hacked.
Exactly. Okay, so when did you, I'd love to hear the birth story of Start9, right? So this problem exists. How, on a very like practical level, are you guys trying to solve it? And how did this birth of this company come about from a personal perspective? I'm kind of curious.
So I didn't start, right? I can't speak for Aiden, right, who's my co-founder and CTO, but my starting point was very practical. I'm fairly technical, right? I'm a software developer by trade. I've been coding for 11 years now. And I'm at the application layer. I'm like a low-level, Linux developer, but I can build apps in Ruby and JavaScript and fine with HTML and CSS and all the web development tools. And I'm quite good. So I'm a fairly technical person, and I have a lot of confidence to be able to follow, GitHub READMEs to self-host, software and containers and all the rest. So 2019, Lightning Network is in reckless phase. All right.
What does that mean?
So the early days of the Lightning Network was like, don't use this because you're probably going to lose money, right? Like it was experimental. It was experimental.
Yeah, sure.
And so there was a hashtag reckless, kind of meme of, screw it, I'm going to be reckless. I'm going to go jump into this. So we did, right? And Keegan, who was a previous, co-founder of Start9, who's no longer here, he had set up his Lightning node. LND, early days, beta LND. And he wanted to play. He was like, all right, your turn. Go set up your LND node and we'll try this thing out. So I sit down and go to install my LND node, and within like 5 minutes, I just say, you got to be kidding me. Like nobody's ever going to do this, And it occurred to me,
because like the energy and effort involved with setting up a node, like essentially like
just fighting with the dependencies and the builds and the configurations. I was just like,
I know many technical people who almost quit or did quit. Who identify as technical and couldn't. Like,
this
just
is
going
to take me the better part of the weekend, if not longer, to get set up. And I mean like intense focus. It's going to destroy the next few days of my life, which a lot of people with my skill set would see as a fun challenge. But I'm a product guy and I come from meat space entrepreneurship, and I was like, if we want people to use the Lightning Network, this is ever going to be a thing, this can't be the user experience, right? Nobody will do it. So rather than doing it, I called Keegan back and said, I'm not doing this. How can we make it easier to do? What's the meta play here? How can we actually develop something that makes me not have to do this? And the answer was, some kind of advanced sysadmin scripting and stuff like that. And we started to talk through the problem of how we could make this easy. And we realized pretty quickly that if we could make it easy for someone, to a non-technical person, to with a few clicks of a button, be up and running with a Lightning node with no compromise, without trusting us, without using us as a custodian or intermediary, trusted third party, that we could apply the same abstractions, the same basic tool to a Bitcoin node. Mm-hmm. In fact, we would have to, because if you want to run a Lightning node, it needs a Bitcoin node.
Yeah.
But to any open source software, we're like, well, what stops me from now running my own Nextcloud server or my own chat server? Mm-hmm. So we quickly made the abstraction. We were like, okay, if we were able to make it easy for someone to run a Lightning node, we could, in theory, make it easy for them to run any variety of open source self-hosted software. And that got interesting really fast. We were like, that's cool. And so we started scouring the world for tools that existed that could do something similar. And there was really one that stood out. And it was very, very specific to Bitcoin. And this was Casa. So back in 2019, Casa was very different than it is in 2025. 2019 Casa was a Raspberry Pi in a box running a Linux distro with Bitcoin pre-installed.
Huh. Interesting.
So
Didn't know.
You buy your Casa node, you plug it in, it's Bitcoin, it serves a UI, you get to see your nodes.
This is Jameson Lopp's Casa? This
Correct.
Is like the security company Casa?
Yes.
Huh, interesting.
He was the CTO at the time. Nick Newman was the product manager, and they had a CEO and founder who, founded the company. I don't remember his name. And so we were like, yeah, that thing. And then, but more abstract, right? This was like very specific to just running a Bitcoin node. This was truly a node in a box, plug and play node in a box. And Jameson at the time was talking about how Lightning is next. Like soon your Casa node you'll be able to turn on Lightning. And we were like, yeah, that's what we want. So we got in touch with Jameson, right? Keegan and I got in touch with Jameson, and he brought Nick along. We all went out for dinner in Denver. And we basically pitched them on us. We had recently moved on from Salt, which is a crypto-backed lending platform, right? Secure automated lending structure. Salt lending, they're still around to this day. But anyway, we had all moved on from Salt, and that's a whole backstory that's kind of cool. But and we were kind of available. We were looking for what we were going to do. It's the best people I had ever worked with, and I knew that if we just found the right thing to do together, it would be a wild success. And we had kind of zeroed in on this, and we realized that Casa was doing it and doing it well. They had a good brand, they had the right trajectory. And so rather than like competing with them, we were like, let's make an overture. Let's make an offer. So we took them out to dinner and was like, hey, we have 4 very skilled developers, entrepreneurs, product people. Like, we're a team that's worked together for years, and we love what you're doing. Are you guys raising? Are you hiring? Are you interested in some contracting? Like, we just like what you're doing, and we want to do it with you. Is there any path forward here? And their reaction to this conversation was largely indifferent. Like, they did not seem interested in their own product. We were really interested in their product, and they were just like, yeah, hardware is hard, and we're trying to do this Series A, and VCs aren't listening, and so we may or may not be hiring. We'll see. They were very defeatist about the thing that we were very excited about.
Interesting.
And it was a little cryptic. And a couple of weeks later, we found out why. They publicly announced, they weren't ready to announce it yet, which is why they didn't tell us. But a few weeks later, they publicly announced the
pivot,
the end of the Casa node and the pivot to this collaborative multi-sig software product and service. And we're like, oh, that's why they weren't interested, because they literally weren't interested in their own product.
They were moving on.
They were moving on. They decided it wasn't commercially viable, right? And Jameson holds to this day that what we are trying to do is not a viable company. And he's entitled to that opinion. Yeah. I disagree. And I think we've proven to a degree that he's wrong, at least so far. We'll see how things go. But anyway, they dropped out of the race. So we just picked up the baton and ran full sprint. We were like, that's the future we want, right? And it wasn't a node in a box. It was, we went for the home run right out of the gate. We said,
we are a private server that can run basically whatever open source software that you guys effectively develop for it on your OS. Right?
Any open source software, period.
Any open source software, period. But the idea was to also sort of develop certain kinds of applications that make it easy to do things like sync a Bitcoin node or a Lightning node.
They already exist. So what we are doing, we make Start OS. That's what we spend all day, every day doing.
Okay.
Right? It's not proper to think about us as like a hardware company.
Which is so this is the operating system.
We sell servers, but that's just the way in which we monetize our software.
Okay.
Because our software is open source and self-hostable, right? We can't sell it.
Right.
We have no IP. It's MIT licensed.
Okay.
So we are essentially selling convenience, support, warranties. We're providing a service in the form of a piece of hardware. Right? That is the physical manifestation.
Run, Start 9 OS on just like any computer. I mean, like,
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have very clear DIY guides to do that. We encourage people to do it.
What's the reason to buy the hardware? Just out of curiosity.
If you don't have a computer.
Okay. Or if you need like a siloed computer.
Or you want the support. When you buy a computer from us, you get a free, you get a lifetime membership to our private support community.
But as a practical matter, if you are going to run a node, and it might just be like, for to help folks understand, right? Like, you probably want a siloed computer that's special just for your Bitcoin node.
Absolutely
not. No. Okay.
There's no reason that needs to be
There's no
true.
reason that's a thing.
No, so let me back up a little bit and then I'll address the division of how you should divide services amongst your various servers, right? If you're running more than one. But ultimately, right, we build Start OS, which is this free and open source operating system that is fundamentally different than every operating system that has ever existed, in that it is purpose-built and optimized to enable a non-technical person to administer a server. Every other operating system, no other operating system fits that description.
Got it.
So iOS is purpose-built to enable a non-technical person to administer a phone or laptop. Or a phone or tablet. Mac, Windows, optimized to enable a non-technical person to run a laptop or desktop. Linux, Linux is this word that encompasses many, many, many different distros, each with its own kind of selling point. But all Linux distros, any prominent ones at least, any that are worth mentioning, are optimized to enable a non-technical person to enable a laptop or to administer a laptop, and a technical person to administer a server.
Got it.
So Linux is how you administer servers in this world, but it's only for the technical people.
Got it.
There is no operating system for a non-technical person to run a server.
So this is the core user of Start9 products, is somebody who is non-technical, who for whatever reason wants to run their own private server.
Yes, which there was no demand for. And that's why it didn't exist. Right. That is my observation for why.
And just again, why are Bitcoin node runners specifically a great user category for that demand?
Sure, because in order to run a Bitcoin node in the optimal way, you can run a Bitcoin node on a client device. You can install a Bitcoin node on your MacBook,
but it won't be private.
It'll be private.
Oh, it will be.
Well, nodes are not private. Right? So they're designed to connect on a peer-to-peer network. So it's not about privacy. It's about uptime and addressability.
Oh, if run on your own private server, there's better uptime?
That's what servers are. So a server is a computer that never turns off. That's it. That's the only difference. Like a laptop can be a server.
Okay.
If you leave it on all the time.
Got it.
Now it's a server. The difference between a client and a server is actually its utility.
Okay.
Not the chips and the boards, the motherboards. It's all the same stuff. So it's its purpose that makes it a server.
The reason you don't want to run a Bitcoin node on your laptop is because you want to be able to turn your laptop off.
Yes.
Okay.
And now your node is not running.
Okay. That's helpful.
Which you can do, by the way. It is if the only reason you want to run a Bitcoin node is to verify inbound transactions, right? To make sure that when someone pays you, they've actually paid you in a totally self-sovereign, trustless way, you can run a Bitcoin node on your laptop, and every time someone wants to pay you, open up your laptop, sync up to the tip of the chain, receive the payment, wait for verification, close the laptop. That is a horrible user experience. So you can do it. It is possible. But isn't it better if your node was already synced up and at the tip of the chain, ready to receive a payment on demand right from your mobile wallet, which is connected to your node? Of course it is. So Bitcoin nodes are best run on a computer that is always up and always connected to the internet and to the Bitcoin peer-to-peer network. And so Bitcoin nodes are fundamentally server applications, not client applications.
Makes sense.
So Bitcoin, for the first time, really ever, made it opened up the market of personal servers, because suddenly there was a subset of the world, this small community, that was like, we need servers.
Like, we have a clear demand for servers.
Yeah. They don't know it's a server necessarily. They just want to run a Bitcoin node, but it's like, oh, that's a server application, and you have no idea how to run a server.
Interesting.
And so that's why we started where we started. We are not a Bitcoin company. Start9 is a sovereign computing company. We make a server operating system, which is what we believe to be the fountainhead, the cornerstone and foundation of an entire computing paradigm, right? That enables people to be fundamentally private and secure and sovereign in their digital lives.
For the sake of being thorough, what are the other most used applications other than, Bitcoin, Lightning, for Start9 right now? Like, what are people actively using these private servers to run with Start9 OS?
Some of the more popular ones are Nextcloud.
Okay.
Nextcloud is the self-hosted open source Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 alternative.
And the reason you would need a suite, the reason you would want a private server for that use case is privacy?
Yes.
Okay. So privacy becomes a big part of the reason why some of these other applications in particular would be used.
Privacy, censorship resistance, control.
Got it.
Right. So, for example, the biggest users of Nextcloud, which is, by the way, just a killer open source project and application. I mean, it's a huge suite of software, is foreign governments.
Right.
Because they don't want to use Google and Apple clouds to run their sovereign governments,
right?
Because it's just American spyware in their minds. Like, so they use Nextcloud. Nextcloud is running on their own servers.
Right. So, nothing you put in a Google Doc or like a Word doc or whatever is private at all. Like that is
all.
At all. Okay. So
in fact, third-party doctrine passed under the Patriot Act says that the second you put your data onto a third-party cloud, like onto an Apple, Google, Microsoft cloud, it is no longer protected by Fourth Amendment rights to search and seizure. So
that's wild.
So there's no warrant required.
That sounds like
law
very
enforcement
fine
is
print.
allowed to just. It's pretty out there. People just don't care or don't know, right? But it's not hidden. This is well understood, and law enforcement or anyone with proper authority can just walk into a Google office and be like, "Tell me everything about them. Show me their pictures. Show me their documents. Everything." They just hand it right over.
And so, in order to effectuate like your own open source instance of Nextcloud, for instance, and keep it private, you functionally need your own server.
Correct.
Like, that is the requirement.
Server application. There's this whole world of applications. People go to the App Store and they're like, that's the applications in the world. Nope, those are client applications.
Everything on the App Store is a client application.
Yes.
Pretty much everything.
Yes. And clients always, well, I shouldn't say always. Some clients are local to your phone, like a calculator. Calculator is not connected to a server.
Client meaning they're pulling data from...
Here's how you know if it's connected to a server. If you can open up a different device and see the same information.
Makes sense.
So if what I do on device A can then be viewed on device B, it's going through a server.
It's going through a cloud.
That's not under-operated by you, which means it's not the information that passes through and is stored on that server is not in any way private or secure.
Is it interacting with the cloud, basically, or not?
Is it correct? And so most of them are. So pretty much every application that you install on your phone is communicating through and storing data on a computer that you do not own or control.
Right. Makes total sense.
In our world, you can download applications onto your phone and they connect to your own server in your home.
And that's it.
And you can do all the same things. Pictures, messaging.
What are the data constraints, though, of your own server? I mean,
depends on the size of your drive.
You can buy as big or little a server as you want.
Size matters.
Yeah, size matters.
It's good. Okay. I'm glad that.
Yeah, that landed.
So yeah, I mean, it's up to you. You run it on any hardware you want.
Okay.
And there's certain limitations. It's not like this is, on par with everything you could do in the closed source world. Those are very well funded applications and companies. I mean, I view Google and Microsoft and them with all their billions in R&D and product development as the R&D department for what we're doing. They figured out the user experience and user interface problems, right? Like they figured out how humans want to interact with client applications. And so now open source is catching up. There's only so good that you can make a messaging app, right? It has been perfected in the form of Telegram, in my opinion. There's just no better way to do messaging than what they're currently doing. So now we can build open source things that do it exactly like them. It's like, thanks, guys, for your billions in investment in R&D over the years. We're just going to literally copy your user interfaces, write it in a different language, and make it open source. And now there's no reason to use you instead of the self-hosted open source one, with one exception, the server component.
So this is like an infinite product design space, like opportunity, basically, is like effectively reinventing the internet for private servers, essentially. It sounds like is like your core mission. How many of your users, if we're looking at your actual clients, so what percentage of them are coming to you because they want to buy or operate Bitcoin nodes?
95% plus.
95% plus at this time. Okay. So this is something that you're very, very functionally aware of. I mean, you are really kind of at the center of why people want to run nodes. What is the point of running a node? Who are these folks that want to run nodes?
We know more than anyone.
You know
we are the group of people on this planet who are most in touch with, quote, the plebs who want to run Bitcoin and Lightning nodes for whatever reasons.
Well, and
we try to help them understand what those reasons should be, what the misconceptions are, what the reality is. We try to educate as best we can.
I was going to say, I imagine that's part of your, like an important part of your marketing strategy is helping people understand why one would want to run a node in the first place and why that even matters.
It's really our only marketing.
Yeah, right.
Is education, right? Is basically just me talking on forums like this.
Why should you run a node?
Trying to explain, what is cloud computing? What is sovereign computing? What is a server? How does the client-server relationship, what is the nature of that relationship? What can you do with your server? Why should you care? And at the moment, we have big, big visions for all the things that people are going to be able to do with their private servers, including connecting IoT devices to have home security systems that are all closed network and not calling out to drop cam so that Google employees can't watch you undress and yada, yada. We can reinvent the entire computing paradigm in a totally sovereign, disintermediated, non-custodial manner. And our marketing is basically me talking about that.
Educating
explaining
folks.
What the problem is, how we solve that problem,
So I want to hone in on Bitcoin specifically for a second. What is the answer to the question? How do you explain to people why one should or would run a Bitcoin node?
Yeah. So there's a couple of reasons to run a node. First and foremost is to verify your transactions, right? To verify inbound payments. So
versus trusting someone else to verify the transactions.
Correct. Those are your only two choices.
Right.
If you send me Bitcoin on chain, that transaction is getting verified by a node, right? It's getting verified by many, many nodes on its way into a block. And then it's getting verified by every node once it's in a block. And so if I want to perform that verification myself, because I trust no one, the whole world is out to get me, right? Like I trust me and only me.
Sovereign individual.
The absolute pinnacle of financial sovereignty. I need to run a node. And it doesn't matter if any other nodes see the transaction, which they would, right? Obviously, it needs to be mined and it's going to flood the network. But even if nobody did, and it was only just you sending money to me through my node, and I sent it to a miner, we sideloaded it to a miner or whatever, so long as my node is doing the verification, I know that I have that money.
Right.
If you are using the default node that comes with your wallet, like if you just download a wallet from the Google Play Store and you click, you create the wallet, write down your mnemonic, you click receive. I show you a QR code and you send money to it and I see, money received. I have no idea, actually, if you sent me money.
Right.
Because my wallet is connected directly to the node that is owned and operated by the team that built the client wallet software. And they could just lie to me.
They could just
Do they
be
have an
wrecking
incentive to? Is this a real attack vector? In most cases, absolutely not, especially for low-value transactions. But I am just crossing my fingers and being like, I hope they're not lying.
Hopefully they got it. Yeah.
Because they could just lie.
So that's number one, transaction verification, reason to run a node.
Yeah,
number two
is censorship resistant to broadcast transactions, right? Which is much less of a reason, right? Because there's so many different ways to broadcast a transaction. But ultimately, a Bitcoin transaction has to get to a miner.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you get a Bitcoin transaction to a miner, right?
You need a node.
The first and most obvious way is to hand it to any node on the network. It's like handing it to any postal service worker that happens to drive by your house. It's like anyone you see, just say, here's my letter, and it'll get where it needs to go. That's the P2P network of Bitcoin.
Yep.
It's any node, you can hand your transaction to.
But you need access to a node one way or another, whether it's yours or someone else's. Yeah.
So if it's not yours, you are hoping that someone will take your transaction,
right?
And that they're all just not blacklisting you,
right?
In
again,
together.
Very low risk, but a practical, but a functional reality as well.
You could, in theory, also hand your transaction directly to a miner, right? If miners have a mechanism for receiving transactions directly, you could just hand it directly to them and bypass the P2P network. Those are your two options. The best option is to run your own node, broadcast your transaction through your node, which your node will automatically then send it to every peer that it's connected to. And it's highly unlikely that everyone
will censor you.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically unheard of. Right. So again, not a huge reason to run a node, but
sure,
it could be in the future if we see a lot more controls and censorship.
Okay.
Another reason to run a node is to enforce relay policy, right? This is basically your node saying what it will and will not assist on its path to a miner.
Right.
It's like you're a postal worker, and you're supposed to just kind of like, anyone could just hand you a letter, but maybe you're against letters that are, in blue envelopes. And you're just like, I'm not going to take that. Other postal workers might, but I'm not going to help you out.
I'm only going to send along the transactions that I think should be sent along.
Correct. And this is like, you can and should, and we have debated the efficacy of something like that, or
because of exactly
meaning.
What you said before, which is that what are the chances that every node will censor blue envelopes? That's
and even
the
then
challenge.
you can kind of like hand it to a miner,
you can slow it down substantively, right? I mean,
there's an
more
impact
nodes,
for
there's
sure.
some measurable.
The person
impact.
holding the blue envelope now has a. Dang it, like I have to go do something else.
Right.
So
and the more people don't want blue envelopes to be passed, the harder it becomes for blue envelopes to be passed.
Right. And eventually, if the miners themselves are like, we don't want to take those, now you've got a real problem.
Right.
Okay. But anyways, for better or worse, it is a reason that you can run a node.
Right.
And then the last one would be to participate in a fork scenario. So nodes decide what Bitcoin is, right? They are the ultimate, think of it like a democracy, right? The nodes are the ultimate decision makers about the consensus rules of the Bitcoin network, right? And we're not talking about relay policy. We're talking about like what is actually a valid transaction, not just whether or not someone will take it. It's like, what is a valid letter, right? Can you hand them a car and say, deliver this? It's like, nope, that's not part of the rules. It has nothing to do with the willingness of a given postal worker. It's like, the USPS does not deliver cars, right? And so Bitcoin is like, we don't take these kind of transactions.
And this is something, this distinction between relay policy and consensus rules is something the community, I feel like, is getting like a broad education in right now.
Absolutely. Totally different layers of network operability. So,
but the only way nodes can basically institute whatever relay policy they want through running an implementation that supports that relay policy. And we'll get back into the protocol developers. Or by
installing a third-party piece of software in front of their node. That grabs transactions before they even hit the node, inspects them for certain characteristics, and drops them. There is nothing to prevent someone from selectively relaying or not relaying a transaction. Again, it's important to then play that out and see what effects it might have at small and widespread implementation. But it is inherent.
In order, on the flip side, right? So I think that's like a great explanation. On the flip side, in order for nodes to affect consensus change, that happens exclusively through the fork process.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So there's, two broadly speaking categories of forks, right? There's soft forks and hard forks, and we can get into the nuance there because it's largely misunderstood. But regardless, it is the nodes that ultimately decide which fork lives on and which one falls by the wayside. And when I say the nodes, I mean the economic power. So it not all nodes are equal when it comes to fork wars. Okay, when it comes to relay policy, all nodes are equal because they're indistinguishable and they all relay and they all have mempools. But when it comes to forks, economic weight is what matters. So, 5 extremely economic nodes like massive exchanges,
Coinbase,
mining pools, businesses that are doing massive amounts of commerce through their node. They you have to measure them based on the amount of economic activity flowing through the node. And so a single one of those nodes could be like, 5,000 plebs. And it's not that pleb nodes have no weight. It's literally it's analogous to how much economic activity goes through.
And just to further explain, just to hammer home the point, the reason why it's really about the monetary value within a node that ultimately has the greatest impact on the fork, that's because basically the fork with the most economic value is going to be the one that everyone kind of chooses to effectively side with. Let's just Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin, I think was a good example here, essentially. It's the winner is the one where the money sides with, basically. Yes. They're going to end up with the largest market cap in dollars. And
Yeah, and it's not about the hodlers, right?
Right, it is
hodlers
not about
are on
the hodlers.
Both chains. They don't really care. Right. In many cases, whichever one wins, it's I got coins on both. Right. But the nodes, it's the economic nodes that determine the fork.
Right. And to some extent, exchanges also play a role in that particular political dynamic, which you mentioned.
So there's 5 constituencies of consensus. So in any fork scenario, when there is a proposal to change Bitcoin, either by constricting or expanding the consensus rules, constricting being a soft fork, expanding being a hard fork, there are 5 political parties that have some degree of power in that process and need to be reckoned with, right? So exchanges are one of those parties. And the main reason that exchanges are one of the parties is, as trivial as it sounds, really the ticker.
Yeah, right.
Right? The exchanges are telling the investing public what Bitcoin is.
Which to put their money in, essentially.
Are you which one gets the BTC ticker? And the exchanges get to make that decision. Now,
it's wild.
Each party, each constituency, right, can be sort of pulled along by the others. You don't want to be the odd man out, okay? If everyone on the network has decided that is Bitcoin and you're the exchange that refuses to change the ticker, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Right.
You have to go along. Consensus is not about unanimity.
Right.
It's about weight. Can we drag you along with us?
It is interesting to think about in the case of Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash as the most recent historical example. How much did existing Bitcoin, how much of that win can we attribute to the fact that was the one that got the BTC ticker? Hard to know. Some amount.
Some for sure. It didn't mean nothing.
Yeah, it didn't mean nothing.
But what the block size wars taught us is that it is the economic nodes that really hold the
fork power,
the trump card. They don't have to play it, right? They can just kind of be a little more passive if it's not super important. If it's not contentious, nodes will just kind of go along. But user-activated soft forks and user-resisted soft forks or hard forks are the nuclear power in Bitcoin when it comes to forks. Nodes will have their way if they want it bad enough. And again, economic nodes.
Specifically, which basically just means the people who hold the most Bitcoin. I mean, that's essentially what that means.
The people who use the most Bitcoin.
The people who use
They don't actually have to hold any.
Right.
Economic nodes means how much money is flowing through this node. How much of the economy depends on this node. If this node goes down, what happens to the economy? If the impact is large, that is a powerful node. If the impact is negligible, you don't matter at all. So the idea is if you want political power in a fork war as a node operator, build a business and run all the economic activity through your node. For example, Start9 sells our products for Bitcoin and Lightning, and all of that flows through our own self-hosted LND node and Bitcoin node.
Makes sense.
So we have some weight. We are an economic node.
All right, guys, I want to take a quick break to thank you for watching and remind you to click the follow button on my profile if you want more Bitcoin technical deep dives like this. I also want to give a shout out to my partners for making the show possible. My leading partner, Best in Slot, just released the programmability module for BRC20, making the execution of smart contracts possible for the protocol. I know that's been long awaited by the BRC20 community. Alongside this release, Best in Slot put out what is arguably the most sophisticated DEX for trading Bitcoin native assets called Coin Cooker, which I also highly recommend checking out if you want to dive into the BRC20 trading game and get started executing smart contracts on Bitcoin. I'd also like to thank Cetrea, building one of the leading implementations of a BitVN-style bridge for Bitcoin. Cetrea is building what I think could become the canonical Bitcoin rollup, enabling programmability, scaling. Really anything is possible with a trust minimized bridge, which is the unique value prop of these BitVM-style rollups on Bitcoin. Lastly, I'm thrilled to announce my newest partner, Spark, which is the leading state chains protocol on Bitcoin. State chains builds upon what was made possible by the Lightning Network for payments, but without the liquidity constraints and the UX challenges that often make self-custodial Lightning impractical. Spark is also led by one of the leading payments infrastructure teams on the planet, including founders from PayPal, Facebook. They're incredibly well positioned to turn Bitcoin into a true institutional standard for payment systems around the world, and I couldn't be more excited to support what they're up to. All right, on that note, let's get back to the show.
So let's run through the rest of the players that are involved. Now we're kind of starting to
broad governance
illustrate. Yeah. And we're going to bounce around here. So, bear with me. But we're starting to, I think, get into like painting the political picture of how Bitcoin works, how Bitcoin governance works. This is a regular theme on this show, is like attempting to understand the Bitcoin governance system and its players. So we've covered nodes, sort of in what they can and cannot do, exchanges. In your lecture about this, you mentioned wallets. We've sort of chatted about wallets briefly already as well.
Wallet developers, meaning like your mobile wallet or your desktop wallet, the thing that shows you your balance and allows you to create and transactions and receive payments. They have to be brought on board because if the fork is constricting rules, then that wallet needs to prevent users from creating transactions that violate the new restricted rules. And if it's a hard fork, if you're making something permissible that didn't used to be permissible, presumably users are going to want to use this new feature, and so wallets need to make that feature available to users.
Right.
And so they're part of you got to get them on board.
Right.
If you want to fork Bitcoin, you got to talk to the wallet developers and be like, hey, here's what is changing.
And a simple but relevant example of that might be something as simple as like, if you wanted to, put monkey pictures on the blockchain, you're going to need to use a wallet that allows you to put monkey pictures on the blockchain, right?
Yeah.
So it's a basic example. Okay, interesting. So wallets, exchanges, nodes, miners would be
miners are
number
an obvious
4.
One for most people to go there, yes.
Obvious political player in all of this. We don't need to go too deep there.
Well,
and then
miners are ultimately the ones that say that flip the switch. Okay.
On consensus change.
Yes. The nodes can force them to do that. Okay. But the miners actually have to flip the switch.
Right.
Miners, what a miner is willing to mine, especially with if they have a large portion of hash power, they are the ultimate gatekeeper. But what the block size war taught us is that miners will go along with the economic activity, lest they start mining shitcoins. Right. Like if you don't go along with the economic activity, if all the people who are transacting in Bitcoin are like, that's Bitcoin, and you're mining something else, what are you mining? It's not going to be worth as much as that.
Right.
So miners have to go along with the economic activity.
Yeah.
However, they actually control the switch.
Right.
Until they go along, you have two forks. You have two chains. You have a chain split.
And arguably, the fifth I would say arguably the other switch puller potentially is this fifth political participant, which is protocol developers.
Yes.
Right? Because they are actually writing the code for these consensus changes.
Presumably you need them to buy into something.
Right.
Otherwise, it doesn't exist.
The miners are not writing this code. Yeah.
They're building it.
Right. They're building it.
Yeah.
Protocol developers and the governance level of the protocol, kind of the governance impact of protocol developers is probably what I've spoken about at most off frequently on the show. I mean, we talk a lot about, opcodes and soft forks that are up for debate and talking about basically the bit process, right? I mean, that's sort of that's probably the deepest level that we've gotten to on this show. Not as much talking about the other political participants, but I'm curious if you want to share a little bit about your point of view about the role of protocol developers as they sit and how their power might be balanced by these other groups.
Yeah, I mean, so protocol developers can come up with they can come up with and propose changes themselves, or the proposal could come from an anonymous person or an exchange,
just a dev,
or whoever.
Yeah.
Ideas can come from anywhere, but in order for a fork to be even a possibility, it has to be coded. So you got to get at least one developer on board with your idea in order to make that idea feasible, right? So
to make it possible.
Correct.
Yeah.
The question that we've seen, that has come up more and more is, well, what happens if the protocol developers come up with an idea?
Which is most often the case.
Correct. And it's great because that's what engineers do.
Right.
Okay?
I mean,
now,
they know the code base pretty well, so they're probably qualified. Here's the problem, though.
Is that this turns traditional kind of technology and product development on its head, right? My conviction of how best to develop new technology and new products is to start with need. You look out at the world and you see a problem. Oh, like me trying to install a Lightning node in 2019. It's like, that's a problem. Let's solve that problem. Problems are opportunities, right? Problems are opportunities for entrepreneurs to build businesses.
Basically what you're saying is most developers and engineers work for users, and they are obsessed with solving user problems and like meeting user demands.
Yeah, but they're like 3 layers deep. So the way that it works in most successful product development businesses and organizations, decentralized or otherwise, is you have a need, okay? That is just inherent. It exists. What it takes is someone to perceive that need and imagine a problem and set out to solve it. This is the entrepreneur. This is the businessman. So basically you have a need and then you have a business, right? Or a proposed means of satisfying that need, of solving that problem.
Right.
Then you have product. Product comes in and takes the broad business mandate, solve that problem, and figures out a product that people could use to solve the problem. Then once you have the product, you hand it to engineers to build. And then there's a feedback loop all the way through the chain.
Right.
The engineers are like, hey, product, that's stupid.
Right.
That is going to take 3 years to build.
Right.
We have an idea of how to do it better. And then product is like, oh, that's great. Let me go take that to business to see if we have the money that your proposed solution, entails.
But to your point, typically it's not the engineers who are coming up with the ideas of what to build and
but even if they are, it gets proposed.
Right. Product is right there.
The pipeline, whoever comes up with an idea, it goes through the pipeline of, is there a need for this? Is it part of what we do? Can we productize it in a way that makes sense? How do we build it?
Right.
Right. That's the flow.
Right.
And then the feedback can go in any direction. And if it's good feedback and positive communication and everyone has the same general vision, it works really well. In the open source, decentralized chaos that is Bitcoin, you just have kind of everyone playing a lot of different roles. And you have protocol developers, engineers who are like imagining a need.
They're just working on shit that they independently think is fun to work on most of the time.
It's neat, right?
Yeah. Like that's cool.
I have been, it's maybe not a forum like this, but like I've been, quite known to be like fucking engineers.
Yeah.
Like I am one. I get it, right? Like I love building stuff.
Right.
But
they're not always the most business savvy people in the world. They're not always actually solving real problems. They actually
they can't be. It's just that like it's a different type of personality. It's a different type of education and experience, and you can be a jack of all trades and do all the things.
But they're kind of like fun tinkerer types
and that's great. And you want R&D departments where it's just like, do whatever your wildest imagination does. Just don't put it in the product until we actually run it through the appropriate channels to make sure that this is a good idea.
Right.
And in Bitcoin, you don't have that like that
you don't
check
have a
and
product
balance.
team. Yeah. There's no product team for Bitcoin.
There's not even a business team.
Right.
And there's very little feedback as to what the actual need of the world is. So what happens, and to get a little more concrete, is you start having like really smart, really well-intended, really great engineers who are just like, wouldn't it be cool if instead of doing it this way, we could engineers love abstractions. They love generalizing things. Like instead of building a knife that does one thing, they're like, well, if we add this and this, it could also be a hammer.
Yeah.
And then if we do this, it could be a drill. And you're like, you're building a Swiss Army knife. And that isn't really how, at the end of the day, people consume products, right? Products have to have a clear identity. They have to have a clear use case. It has to be easy to use. Like you identify a need and you solve it perfectly with iteration after iteration after iteration. And if you lose focus along the way and you start building everything that comes to your mind, you get distracted by every shiny thing that could turn a profit or everything that captures your fancy, you kind of eventually just lose your market because people are like, what is that thing again? What does it do? How do I do it? It just becomes an everything.
Your point of view is starting to show.
Yeah. Everything has a purpose. And if you cannot clearly identify that purpose and execute on it, like through user experience and product, it will fail. This isn't just like, I prefer this. I believe that to build something successful that can withstand the test of time,
right,
it has to have a clear purpose and it has to be easy to use. And I think that when you quote, put engineers in charge of things,
right,
they lose that because they're not entrepreneurs. They're not business people and product people. They're experimenters. And this is a good quality. But it's important to be checked, right? There needs to be some degree of like,
So let's like talk about theoretically like how they are checked and like sort of how this works.
We're witnessing it right now.
Something that I think about every day. I'm just like, in my mind, the thing that like kind of keeps me up at night about Bitcoin probably more than anything else is this sort of, there's a lot of lack of clarity of like how the merge button gets pressed and, how this all works. But at the end of the day, to your point, in theory, the reason we shouldn't be worried about the fact that they have this relatively serious, even potentially centralized level of control over pushing the merge button, whoever has access to that repo. The reason in theory we're not worried about that is because there's checks and balances. So let's talk about nodes specifically as, potentially the players that are part of that checks and balances system. That's sort of what we're seeing. And maybe we just dive right in. Let's talk about arbitrary data specifically as an example. That's sort of where we are in modern history. Really quickly before we get into this. So when ordinals happened, there became like a new challenge with nodes specifically, or at least a substantive concern. With running nodes because of the UTXO set growing. How did that affect your business as like somebody who basically is effectively selling nodes? I mean, was that like a conversation that was coming up? Was there an immediate impact to Start9 pre-knots, but just like when ordinals popped on the scene?
Yes.
Okay.
So when we launched, and you can view this as a mistake or not, I mostly put it in the category of mistake, but we actually learned a lot as a result. So quick preface, when you design software to run in resource-constrained environments, like on low-powered CPUs, minimal RAM, no disk space, like computers that are old and crappy, basically. If you can get your software to run on those, it's probably really good software, which means if you up the resources, it's just going to fly, right?
Okay.
And so we started within that mindset by building StartOS for the Raspberry Pi.
Okay.
The Raspberry Pi 4, which at the time was only available in up to 4 gigabytes in 2019. And so we were like, okay, we are going to build a Linux distro optimized for self-hosting and running a personal server. And one of the first services that we are going to make available for this operating system is Bitcoin, is a Bitcoin node. And so we did it. We made it such that the Bitcoin node could run on what was then called Embassy OS on a Raspberry Pi with minimal resources, including literally only running off of the SD card, the little flash SD card plugged in, and it worked really, really well. And we were selling these things, right? For, I believe at one point, $99, right? And eventually we were able to up it a little bit. But this was like a very entry level, like spontaneous purchase decision that somebody could make. Like, oh, sure, I'll run one of those. It's $100, no big deal. And we did. We entered the market with this offering. And we gradually beefed up the pies and did external drives so that you could do full archival nodes, because the original one only supported a pruned node. And what happened in like 2023 was all of a sudden it started failing on that hardware.
Interesting.
And this was even with the SSD, not just running it off of the flash card, but like it suddenly became very difficult to sync a Bitcoin node on our hardware. And we kept getting all these really ghost complaints. Like sometimes it would work fine. And then other times somebody would be like, hey, it's been stuck at 65% for 3 days. Like, what's going on? And then they'd unplug it, just pull power, which you're not supposed to do, and then they'd plug it back in. And now Bitcoin would be in what's called a rolling forward state, where it's flushing the UTXO set to disk, and it takes forever. And it just, suddenly we had a bad product offering. And we didn't really know what happened. It was not attributable to just blockchain size growth. That should have just been a data storage problem. What we later found out was it was this
boom of new UTXOs.
It was
eventually
people taking advantage
with
of mechanisms of embedding data that both bloated the blockchain, required additional compute to verify signatures, and bloated the UTXO set. So Bitcoin was basically being hit in 3 ways by this.
The bloating of the UTXO set was probably the most
harmful, for sure. Yes, because to sync, Bitcoin Core has to first write UTXOs to disk and then later read. And if it can hold them all in memory, in RAM, then this doesn't affect you as much. But the Raspberry Pi by then had 8 gigabytes. But in late 2023, the UTXO set exceeded 8 gigabytes.
I remember that, actually.
It like went parabolic. And what this meant is that when this chain sync hit that point in time, it could no longer hold the UTXO set in memory. And so it would start saving it to disk. And now you have to read from disk, which on a USB 3 port to an external SSD on a Raspberry Pi became just like, it just stopped. It ground to a halt. It was so slow.
So there were like, basically everyone was impacted in the sense that like syncing became like a much slower thing. And then like certain devices just were not able to even sync, basically.
But at the time, you had the rise of Start9, Umbrel, MyNodeBTC, Raspberry Blitz, which was named after Raspberry Pi, right? Raspberry Blitz. You had people even still trying to use the old Casa nodes. And so a lot of people were running nodes on Raspberry Pis in 2023.
So how did you, address this? Were you like working on new products? Like what options were there available to you as a product designer? In terms of like, okay, this is my business. We need to sell products that work.
Yeah.
What, again, pre-knots, I'm curious about that, how that impacted your business as well. But like, what was your plan for dealing with this?
So first of all, we pulled our hair out trying to figure out what was causing this problem. It was not immediately
apparent. Oh, it was not obvious immediately. But eventually the world figured it out.
Mostly. There's still a little bit of mystery on because the Pi would actually grind to a halt. It would do like 1 block a day. And there's almost no compute imaginable that should take that. I mean, something clogged the system up to the point of basically killing the node. And it didn't happen with all Pis. So it was subtle differences in like the actual quality of the USB cord, of the external drive, the enclosure for the drive, the USB 3 bus on the SBC, on the board itself. Like even just a little bit of inefficiency broke the whole thing. Like we were right on the thread, right on the line of whether it could work or not. So it worked for some people, it wouldn't for others. And we were like, what is the difference here? And can we fix it? And eventually we just said, look, Bitcoin has outgrown the Raspberry Pi, at least in this external drive configuration.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
And so we just went the mini PC route. We were like, you know what?
Yeah.
Pi is a toy anyway.
Yeah.
You're going to use this for real for sovereign data storage, and Bitcoin nodes and Lightning nodes, you should have a proper computer.
And that
so
will be inevitable. That will be inevitable in any like universe, right? Like as Bitcoin grows, the hardware that's necessary to run Bitcoin will grow as well, no?
And if anything, right now it's going the other direction.
You mean we're shrinking? The UTXO set is shrinking?
No, it's that the software optimizations combined with just Moore's law of computing resources.
Oh, I see.
Just kind of leads to it should be cheaper and cheaper, right? The resources on the computer itself.
But the UTXO set is going to fundamentally grow over time.
Not if they get spent. The UTXO is only in the UTXO set as long as it's unspent. As soon as it's spent, it's no longer there. And it can create a new UTXO, but you could combine multiple. You could combine a bunch of inputs and create one output, and you've shrunk the UTXO set.
It's funny, Michael. Yeah, I've chatted about this a bunch with various engineers, right? Like, how do you basically incentivize UTXO consolidation, which is like a whole other question. But yeah, I mean, to your point, like there is like a universe where you could potentially... Yeah, and arguably that's part of what's happening right now is we're incentivizing consolidation and or disincentivizing splits.
Sure.
So okay. So this is sort of like the outcome, right? Is you're like, okay, we just can't run nodes on Raspberry Pis anymore. Like that's just 2023 is the end of running nodes on Raspberry Pis because UTXO set exploded. And so then like NOTS happens basically.
Well, so NOTS happened as a very... So a little background,
history.
Right? So, Luke had already had NOTS prior to this. NOTS existed, but it existed largely as a RPC API superset. So RPC API is like how you query your node for information.
Okay.
You're like, hey, what's the current block? Or, look up this transaction, right? You can query the node for particular things. And this is done through an API.
Okay.
And Luke wanted more information from his node than what was offered by the Bitcoin Core API, of which he was an active contributor anyway. But some of the things he wanted were very unique to him. He's like, I want this information. I don't know if it's useful to the whole world. Yeah, it was like his implementation. Yeah. So NOTS was just this, like, it basically was Bitcoin Core with some added...
With his edits.
Mechanisms of querying the node. I wouldn't even say edits. It's purely additive.
Okay.
Right? And so that was NOTS. And when the spam started, right, in 2023, when there was a lot of just like people using Bitcoin for, just fad, scammy or otherwise, again, totally subjective, but I think most of the people who were using Bitcoin and who have been using and want to see Bitcoin used were not part of this. This was like a different group that came in and was like, hey, we're going to use Bitcoin for all this stuff now. Luke saw that as a bug.
Right.
Okay.
Very clearly made that very clear.
Software bug as defined by unintended behavior of the software. Like when SegWit was designed. He didn't
see this as a user issue. Like users shouldn't be using this
very
software.
Properly.
This was a software bug that needed to be
fixed. If you write
fixed.
software to do a certain thing and it does something else, that is a bug.
This is kind of a callback to the concept of like metapolitics. What was the word that you used?
Megapolitical.
Megapolitical. I mean, this is sort of an example.
This is if you go back to the discussion boards of SegWit activation, nobody was talking about using the witness discount to store JPEGs. Nobody. It was not an intended use case of that, right? And so when it started being used for that in a way that they had not imagined, Luke viewed that as a bug. It's like, oh, we wrote software to do A. People are using it to do B. B is harmful for the following reasons, which could be debated, but he laid them out.
Right.
Let's fix the bug.
Right.
And it wasn't just a proposal. He fixed it. He wrote the code. He was like, hey.
In NOTS.
In Core. So Luke was like, okay, in the same way that we cap the amount of data that can be stored in op return, let's also cap the amount of data that can be stored in the witness. Let's also cap the size of a script pub key.
You mean he created like a core fork and...
No, he put up a PR.
Oh, he put up a PR. Okay, got it.
He fixed the bug in code.
Right.
And said, okay, guys, it's ready. Let's fix the bug.
But no one merged it.
No, it got into a heated debate. It was like,
this was the beginning.
Well, I don't know. This seems like a valid use case.
Do you
and Luke's
see
like,
that
are
as
you
the
guys
moment
crazy?
when the debate really started was when he put up the PR? Okay,
yes,
interesting.
And that's the piece of this history that's lost.
I think I vaguely, I was going to say, I don't even know. I'm like, I hardly.
This started. And Luke was like, let's stop this. It's a bug. It's bloating the UTXO set. It's bloating the chain. It's not the intended use case of the software.
Right.
Here's the fix.
Well, and that's when like core developer, that's when like the real serious broader developer community started talking about this in a serious way, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
It was also the birth of Knots as we know it today.
Okay, because
Core didn't merge the PR.
So he merged it into
his fork.
Okay, got it.
He's like, I'll fix the bug on my fork. Okay, and anyone who wants the bug-free Bitcoin can use Knots.
Got it.
And of course, that got no traction because it was largely under the radar. Most people were unaware of this moment.
But that changed. I mean, Luke is a strong I mean, no, I don't know if I'll say that. Yeah, I hesitate to say it, but he's loud, you know? I mean,
he's opinionated.
Eventually, people did learn about Knots and understood that it could have this effect.
Things take time, but there's also just a lot of confusion.
How did that affect your business? So, like, let's move in. Okay, we're kind of coming back to Start9. So, Start9, you can run any open source software you want. That means that you can run any Bitcoin client that you want, Bitcoin Core, any other implementation. When did you guys start to, I assume you offer Knots in your sort of OS suite, essentially. When did that decision get made?
Think of it like an app store.
Right, it's like
we
an app
don't
store.
make the software,
I've seen it.
We just make it available.
Yeah. So when did you make that decision? Like after this PR, kind of like genesis moment, like how is Start9 affected from that point forward?
So at the time, I wasn't even fully informed about
the whole situation.
About Luke opening the PR and it getting rejected and then building it into Knots. Like there just wasn't an insane amount of communication there. Like most people, and we're building a company that was around this and we still weren't fully informed. We're much more informed today because the people who are doing things are informing us because we play a much more kind of critical role in the ecosystem. Yeah. But at the time, we were still kind of on the rise and we weren't critical. And so if we didn't go looking, we didn't know. And we were busy building StartOS, right? Not paying attention to the politics of Bitcoin as much.
Yeah.
Right. We were building a general purpose Linux operating system. And that's really what we do. It was also around the time when Keegan left and he was kind of our Bitcoin guy. Like if I was like, what's the latest in Bitcoin? I'd go to Keegan.
It's interesting you mentioned Keegan because, Keegan is of course now at Alpin Labs. I believe he's still there.
Not anymore, but yeah.
Oh, he left. Oh, okay. So maybe it's not as relevant, but obviously Alpin Labs is, working on BitVM and they are also using arbitrary data for their tech, but in a very different
arbitrary
way.
In that sense, right?
That is absolutely arbitrary data.
Is it not pagan for the layer 2? I don't know much about what Alpin Labs is doing.
So
BitVM is designed to peg into the base chain and then to do...
But what BitVM depends on the ability to store data on chain.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's not arbitrary.
It is arbitrary data.
Okay.
It's arbitrary. So basically what you have to do is you have to...
Is there not a protocol that identifies it as a BitVM?
Well, what's your definition of arbitrary data? Maybe we should start there. Arbitrary data meaning any data that isn't relevant to just monetary transactions on layer 1 Bitcoin.
Sure. So what I mean is this. So let's say you have...
Luke wants BitVM data to also not happen, just for context. So for instance, the company Citria is one of Alpin Labs' competitors. And Citria was the one who wanted to use OpReturn for arbitrary data related to their BitVM bridge implementation. And Luke obviously wants to quash that, right? So the OpReturn data, Luke does not see as separate from the monkey pictures. He sees them as the same. BitVM and monkey pictures are the same thing to Luke.
It's an oversimplification. He does uphold the use case of Bitcoin to act as an anchor for L2s. He just believes that the amount of data necessary to do that is extremely minimal. So there's a threshold of how much. It's beyond this, and it can't possibly just be to anchor an L2. You're doing something else. Because to anchor an L2, you basically just need a hash. Right? That is kind of the...
Well, no. So with that, no. So what BitVM basically does is you have to essentially inscribe, for lack of a better word, the data of a huge ZK proof that like Bitcoin cannot verify without an enormous sum of data, essentially. You have to inscribe that data on chain. That is essentially how you verify a ZK proof on Bitcoin. So obviously there's lots of ways that the team is working on optimizing and putting as little data as they possibly can. And there's ways that they use data other than just putting the proof data on chain. But functionally speaking, right? I mean, it's a good question for Luke. Like, what is that limit of like how much data, is okay to be putting arbitrarily on chain and for what reasons? It gets complex. He often does not make a distinction between arbitrary data for the use of things like bridging versus monkey pictures.
So definitionally, just to go back to make sure that we're using the words the same, right? So if something is an arbitrary data store, it just means that it can store data of any variety.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that everything stored on it is arbitrary. That was all it was distinguishing between, is that a bit VM kind of data blob is identifiable as a bit VM data blob. Otherwise, it couldn't be used. And so
are ordinals.
It isn't arbitrary.
Well, ordinals saying what data is inscription data. You know what data is, right?
And it is that identifiability, the fact that if you want to gamify your data, like if you want to put data onto a system and have others around the world recognize it as data for an inscription, an ordinal, a bit VM, whatever, that it can then be identified and filtered.
Wait, so
because it has to be identifiable.
Let's go back to knots for a second.
Yeah.
So knots happens. When did you put knots in the Start 9 OS?
Mid 2024, I want to say.
And is the default for the Start 9? Because we had this interesting conversation where you kind of illuminated me on this. So you have offered default settings for Bitcoin nodes with using Start 9 OS. Are you currently using Bitcoin Core or knots as the default?
So unfortunately, the current version of Start OS has a shortcoming in the operating system. So because of dependencies, things like LND, CLN, VTC Pay server, they require Bitcoin. Okay. And so there's multiple Bitcoins that can satisfy that dependency.
Right.
And the way that StartOS is architected today, and this is changing in the next release, but the way that it's architected today is it does that through the ID of the dependency.
Okay.
So LND is looking for something called Bitcoin D, the ID, to be installed on the system. And if you install knots, it's Bitcoin D. And if you install Core, it's Bitcoin D. LND is just like, that's just Bitcoin.
Right.
I don't really
that
care which one it is. It's just Bitcoin. But because they share the same ID, StartOS can't tell the difference between them. So if we were to put them on the same registry, on the same marketplace, it would be a collision. It would break it. It wouldn't work. You can't put two Bitcoin Ds on the same registry. So we had to put them on different registries. But also now for the sake of
what's
updating,
like the user experience like of that?
You have to switch registries. So when you go to the marketplace, think of it like going to a mall. You can go to various stores. So you're looking at a store and you switch to a different store within the marketplace and you can download other pieces of software.
So there's like a store that has like LND, Bitcoin Core, something else. And then you have to go to a whole different store to get LND plus knots plus whatever.
Well, LND is just on one store.
Okay.
Right. You only have to put things on different stores if there's a reason to put them on different stores. And so we have two stores. We call them registries, but we have two registries that we ourselves host. Where the binaries are actually being hosted on our servers. And when someone clicks download, we ship them the binary. And these two registries are the Start 9 registry, which we brand, right? We put our brand behind it. And the other one is the community registry, which is more like, for whatever reason, we can't put our brand behind this, it goes there. And to be listed on our registry, it has to check all the boxes. It has to be something that we as a team and a company ideologically agree with. It works well. We like the user experience. We understand the software so that we can provide support for it when people come into our support channels like, hey, how do I use LND? We know, right? We're experts in the software on the Start9 registry so that we can provide support for it.
So at this point, there's no like default. It's not like when you get your start, when you
the
open.
Start9 one shows by default. Defaults are almost unavoidable, right?
Right.
If you want to create a positive user experience, you have to leverage defaults to some degree. We try to minimize it, but it's really unavoidable. And so when someone goes to the marketplace, the store that they're looking at first is the Start9 registry.
Okay.
All right. And if we have many services that are on the community registry, and as a practice, we never say why.
At what point in this process do you choose core or NOTs for my node? Or for my Bitcoin
Core was
implementation?
the only Bitcoin we had for years.
Right.
And so it was on the Start9 registry.
Right.
So when we added NOTs, it went to community.
Oh,
because
interesting.
we couldn't.
Oh, I get it.
We couldn't put it on the Start9 registry because it would collide with core.
Got it.
So it went to community.
So you have to tell people, if you know that somebody wants to run NOTs and that's why they're getting a notice because they want to run it, then there's just instructions. You have to go to this. You have to go to the community
it's
marketplace.
Literally button, switch to the community registry.
But that's how it works.
But a lot of people just don't even know that the community registry exists. And so they're looking at it and they're like, hey, where is Bitcoin NOTs? I want to run NOTs. And I'm like, you got to switch to the community registry.
So did your, again, we imagine now there's a lot of popularity. There's a lot of people who are, kind of arming up as a result of this sort of political situation that we're in. People who never ran nodes before, or maybe now incentivized, they're getting educated and they're wanting to politically express themselves, as you said, by running nodes, potentially by that run NOTs. Did you see like a big impact to your business? I mean, was there a big run-in of plebs coming in and buying Start9s because they wanted to run NOTs?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Huge.
Do you have like some numbers that you can share?
Sure. But we predicted this. Okay. So back when we started this, we targeted Bitcoiners, right? Again, we're not a Bitcoin company,
right?
But that was our political base and target market, for launch, because they needed to run a server more than any other constituency in the world that we could imagine, because they wanted to run nodes.
Yep.
But even at the time, we were like, this is a great initial market for us because it's going to grow really fast. Yeah, right. We think that running a Bitcoin node is going to become popular,
right?
Almost peer pressure type of popular. Like everyone's going to need to run a node, and it's going to be the result because we went through the block size war. Okay, we had all experienced that, and we saw how it was won, and it was won by the economic nodes. And so we were like, wow, well, the next war, people are going to want to fight. They're going to want to participate, and that's going to mean running a node. So if we have the optimal product for running a node, we will have a successful business. It was a hypothesis right from the get.
Right. You were like, the next time there's like a governance war, people are going to
nodes
there's going to be demand for nodes, basically.
So
and there's going to be demand for pleb nodes, right? Which is really what you specialize in.
Correct. So let's position ourselves to capture that demand as part of our larger plan for creating a successful, sustainable business and computing paradigm. And so we predicted it, and literally in 2023, I even made a tweet. I was just like, node wars are coming. Like, things were starting to heat up, and I was like, guys, it's coming. Like, everyone's going to node up soon.
Right.
And we were very well positioned to capture that. The conspiracy theorists go further and say that we caused it.
I was going to say,
the arms dealers want wars.
You've gotten some criticisms that,
it's a joke.
You love the arbitrary data wars. You love you'll call them node wars, maybe.
Love, hate. They're a thing.
Right, they're a thing.
I don't love or hate reality.
But you are providing tools for people to participate in this conversation in a real way. Yeah.
Correct. And in an
beyond Twitter,
good way, in an important, peaceful way.
They're voting, basically.
Yes, right. We're
nodes is how you vote.
Enabling people to participate in the political process of Bitcoin.
So, and again, what people can practically do with their node is that they can run whatever relay policy they want through whatever implementation, or just on their own, whatever software they choose to run, or they can go, or they can fork. While we have a little bit of shred of time, I want to make sure we cover the fork possibility of this, right? So we have all these people who are coming and either switching from core to NOTs if they were all running on nodes, or potentially buying nodes to run NOTs so that they can politically express this opinion. What do you think is the chances that this turns into a fork, right? And again, actually, I'll back up and share, in theory, right? If if protocol developers, there's now this sort of core versus knots debate, and it's largely because core protocol developers are instituting relay policy that maybe some node runners don't want. At what point does that not just become, okay, I'm going to run a different implementation and, slow down the relaying of these transactions, which has some impact, but, doesn't actually stop the thing fully.
Right.
At what point do you have a fork situation here?
Yeah. So the original thinking on Luke's and the knots side, we'll call it. I don't like the clear tribalism necessarily because it's more nuanced than that. But the thinking on that side was a fork is fine, right? To in consensus limit data in various parts of a transaction, but it is ultimately inadequate to prevent spam. Because information can be encoded in an infinite number of ways to varying degrees of expense and risk, you can never stop spam. You can never eliminate it. This is the thinking on Luke's side.
Right.
But your best hope of minimizing it is a rapidly adaptable, flexible deployment of relay policy.
Right.
Because what you're effectively doing is you're saying,
slowing it.
Yeah, like, hey, there emerged this new type of spam. Again, it is a subjective term.
Yeah.
Unless you identify Bitcoin's purpose.
I hate that term, but sure.
Within a certain...
Right.
It's any information...
Non-monetary data.
Yeah, sure. If you define Bitcoin as a monetary system, which I personally do.
Yeah. But that's just
maybe
like
spam
factual.
is
that's a little
word,
judgy.
but it's counter to the point of the system. Or
right.
Whatever, okay.
Sure.
It's not the intended use case. We'll call it that way. So if you identify it as money, that is also up to someone to do.
Debate. Yeah.
But the thinking was that if you do identify it as that,
right,
and you do want to prevent things that are not that,
right,
the most effective way to do it is every time a new mechanism, and there are infinite numbers of them, emerges of embedding data,
right,
so long as it's gamified, which it needs to be valuable, right? If I put data on the chain and nobody can decode it,
right,
it's just me.
Right.
But the second I want other people to be able to decode it, I need to publish the decoding mechanism,
right,
which means a filter can be written to identify it and remove it, right? So yes, it's cat and mouse, but that's the thinking is it's like, if I spin up some new startup and it's based on this new protocol,
right,
and nobody's using it, then it's not a problem. I do a few transactions and the spam is minimal, right? But if it catches on, it starts becoming a nuisance, so to speak. Then Luke or whoever is, deploying the code can create a patch, a new filter to target that specific thing, deploy it, everyone updates, and now it can't go through the peer-to-peer network.
Right.
And the thinking behind this is that, well, if you do that, many people won't even try in the first place because they're like, I can only do this transaction so long as I'm not popular. The second it gets popular and widely adopted, it'll get shut down. Which VC is going to invest in that business? So the money would dry up. The idea that every time something gets popular, it gets nuked from the P2P network no longer becomes a viable investment in the first place in time or money.
Back
That's
up.
the thinking. I'm just telling you.
Yeah. Back up. I want to make sure I'm understanding the situation. So we're going beyond relay policy now, basically. Like, what are the options beyond? Like, when you say like Luke can put a patch, like, are we just talking about change?
I'm just talking about relay.
You're just talking about knots right now. Okay. But I want to get to this sort of point. Like, at what point does Luke, effectively fork?
Well, but the point is that he doesn't want to.
He doesn't want to.
Well, he's not against a fork. It's just like, that doesn't solve the problem because they can just come up with another way to encode the data. You can't fork every time a new method of embedding data emerges because forks are risky and time-consuming.
100%.
They're slow.
100%.
What he's saying is that you need an agile, flexible, rapidly deployable thing. It's like it's like an antivirus update to your software. It's like, oh, there's a new malware that's spreading around.
So it's just updating relay policy, basically.
Correct.
It's just updating the software with it.
No,
which is not a fork. But there have been some rumors that he is potentially interested and open to.
Are you talking about the leaked hard fork thing?
Potentially.
That's not real. I mean, that's not a real, that is a ideation around, let's say that something illegal were to get into the chain.
Okay.
And actual like law enforcement was just like, anyone that's storing this, now that we know it's there, is breaking the law and criminally prosecutable.
Yep.
Anybody that relays it is as well. Is there a mechanism by which we could, go in and replace the actual content, the illegal content,
that would require
with a ZK proof?
Oh.
So that you're removing the content, but you still leave the block. You still leave the transaction. You just replace it with some sort of cryptographic proof that still allows people to sync. Okay, so you can selectively pluck out things. The question then becomes like, well, who gets to do that? And so the conversation that he was having was him ideating this.
This was just a brainstorming.
Yeah. It was a
not
private
a real
brainstorm about, is there a way to go into a chain and remove illegal content in a way that does not have
remove
to
the monetary data,
reorganize the blockchain?
Right.
And it got leaked as like he's planning to hard fork. It was very, very disingenuous.
Okay. Like, well, that's helpful for context because
he does not want to do that.
Okay.
I can guarantee you. It makes no sense.
Well,
I shouldn't say it makes no sense. It is an interesting idea, but the amount, it would be a hard fork. It would be governance challenges forever. Like who gets to decide what gets plucked from the blockchain at this point, So
you don't see, and you would say like most of the folks who are kind of in this universe or sort of like, kind of going and like using start9s to run knots, for instance, they're almost entirely not economic nodes. So you would say that they would not be incentivized to even get into a fork wars that they know on some level they would lose.
Sure. Unless they had some economic nodes
on their side. Which they could, I guess.
In which case they can just add weight
They could lobby.
So here's the deal. In a fork situation,
right.
I sort of misspoke earlier. It doesn't matter really. I mean, it kind of does, but what really matters is perception of economic power.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you can strong arm the miners by scaring them, you're going to be mining shitcoin if you don't go along with this fork. Even if you're bluffing, they still might go along with it and you can succeed. You can bluff your way into a successful soft fork. We did it with Taproot and we did it with Segwit. Did not have the economic power to pull off those forks.
Interesting.
But we sure pretended like we did. And the miners went along because they are terrified of mining shitcoins instead of Bitcoin. They're in the business of mining Bitcoin. So even a little bit of risk of not being on the right chain is enough to force their hand sometimes.
Is there any part of this, like we've covered a lot of the general governance system. Is there anything before we close that you want to share about like what you think is, like what keeps you up at night about the way the governance system works right now? And what do you want to see happen to improve it?
So personally, I think that there is a good and proper place for relay policy, right? You can call them filters or you can call them, rate limiters, right? They limit the instance rate of certain types of transactions.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
It is. It's just limitation. You're just trying to suppress it a little so that the peer-to-peer network is reserved for the primary use case, we'll call it, right?
Sure.
It's first-class citizenship and second-class citizenship.
Sure, yeah.
I think that there's a proper place for that, right? Part of it is a pressure release valve. So if you're politically savvy, it's a mechanism of statecraft. Like if you are a ruler, so to speak, right? Not that there's a ruler in Bitcoin, but if you were, this is an analogy.
Right.
You kind of want to let people protest, right? Like let them go out and smash some stuff up.
Yeah.
Because if you suppress that for long enough, they're just going to hang you. So like it's smart to leave people their mechanisms and pressure release valves. And to a degree, that's what filters are. Secondly, at a certain level of adoption, like if it's not just me running a filter because I dislike a certain number and don't want to see transactions with that number mined ever, I have no effect on the network. But if everyone agrees with me, if everyone adopts a filter, supermajority, 80, 90% plus, the peer-to-peer network really can't be used for that transaction anymore. It really, really is effective. The argument that it's ineffective relies on this idea that, the people that want to do those transactions will just sort of like go
to miners,
direct to miners and build these things, which then has these negative consequences on the nodes themselves.
Right.
Which is a valid claim.
Yeah.
But it is at a cost, right? It's an added cost of effort to build the bridges. The miners are going to charge
they'll charge a premium.
Premium for that. There's also risk. social, and legal, depending on exactly what you are trying to do. Right? The miners aren't just going to arbitrarily accept your JPEG. They're going to look at it to make sure that they're not legally liable for intentionally putting illicit content onto an immutable database. So it creates friction, it creates effort, it creates economic cost. Okay? If that type of transaction is so powerful, like there's so much demand for it that people are like, let's do it. Let's build the bridges. Let's incur the added costs. Let's hire the lawyers. Let's build these bridges. And it picks up, and it actually starts to create those negative consequences for the network. Like the network can no longer see what's about to be mined because it's all being done privately through this side channel. The nodes can always just drop the filter and welcome that transaction back in by acknowledging that it is a standard use case of Bitcoin. It's like, wow, that thing proved itself out. Let's grant it first-class citizenship back in. So it's like the doomsday scenario where these side channels cause the network catastrophic harm is not real, because the network can always just stop doing it and be like, oh, this is causing harm. Let's allow these transactions back in. And they'd be happy because now it's cheaper and less risk. And like all the things that they incurred over here, they don't have to incur anymore.
Interesting. And I think that this idea of like relay policy, basically like having lots of implementations and really like giving, all nodes the ability to run, whatever software they want and make their relay policy. The idea that is, you called it a release valve, right?
Yeah. In many cases, because they're ineffective unless everyone's doing them.
But it also,
it's just you protesting against the wind.
In some way does, it like gives some power, like the ability to give nodes that level of power in some way may prevent something like a fork.
Yes.
Right? This is a key. Yeah. I think this is like a key.
Yes. It's that if you remove the ability of nodes to configure filters,
to make decisions like that,
then their only way to express their political will is to try to fork. Now, they don't necessarily have the economic power, but that doesn't mean they can't get it.
Right.
Right? This is politics.
Right.
Back channeling, bribery, blackmail, you name it. There's a lot of ways to get what you want in this world. And Bitcoin is not immune to these types of tactics, good, bad, and ugly. And so, I predict, and we can, I'm sure we need to be wrapping up.
Yeah.
But I would give it a greater than 50% chance that in the next 6 months, there will be a contentious soft fork to limit data in every part of a transaction. The witness discount, hop return, and script pub keys in consensus.
Oh, so you think there will be a soft fork, just not a hard fork? Yeah.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Meaning a constriction of the consensus rules. Like what used to be permissible will no longer be permissible in consensus. Greater than 50% chance in the next 6 months, it will be contentious, and it could be really, really damaging in the short term to Bitcoin.
This is, I think, like an excellent place to pause and just...
and I have reasons to believe this.
I am...
Good ones.
Oh, I bet you do. I bet you have the alpha on this. Maybe tee it up for part 2.
I do. I'm in the room, so to speak.
If this comes up, we're going to do a part 2 that like specifically talks about like the political environment of what's happening if that were to take place.
We talked broadly about governance in Bitcoin. There's actually something brewing here. I mean, it's been...
Interesting.
I don't want to say brewing, like we're in the middle of a controversy.
Right.
And to be honest, a lot of people think that the release of Core V30 is the end of this controversy.
Interesting.
That is made up gibberish.
I mean, I agree. I think this is going to go on for like a couple years.
Well, I mean, it could be much faster than that, right? Because again, the fork, if there's a soft fork to limit, to cap data in various parts of the transaction, that does not end the filter debate. Per my statement earlier, this is a temporary stopgap to eliminate certain known methods of spam.
Right.
But it does not prevent future ones, which should be dealt with using relay policy, not soft forks, because if there is a soft fork next to it, it's very risky. Like you could end up with 2 Bitcoins. You could end up with actually 2 Bitcoins. And while that's happening, exchanges freeze because nobody knows what the ticker is. Like the proper way to do a soft fork is planned with signaling, and you get all the constituencies on board. You have meetings, you back channel. It's just politics.
Yeah.
But when everyone stops communicating and starts calling each other names, you end up with a scenario where somebody tries to use force, tries to force the hand.
Right.
And if they're politically savvy, and they have economic weight behind them, it can really raise hell.
This is
I think that's coming.
I'm very excited for our part 2.
Okay.
We'll do our part 2 because, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out if/when it sounds like that happens.
Yeah.
I think that'll give us an opportunity to talk more about just like varying kind of emotions behind this on all sides as well. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt, so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.